Good day from Harvard Square, and welcome to another edition of our Author Spotlight series, featuring our very own professor and alumnus, Dr. Carlos Vargas. My name is Jill Felicio, and I am the Director of Advancement at Harvard's Division of Continuing Education. And I'm delighted to be your host today and absolutely honored to introduce Dr. Vargas, who is with us to discuss his fantastic new book, Sustainable Finance Fundamentals, and take your questions live. Now, as we get underway, I encourage you to use chat to say hello and reflect, but place any questions that you wish to pose in the Q&A box. We've set aside time later in the hour to address them. Now, this presentation is being recorded, will be fully captioned, and then posted on Harvard Extension School's YouTube channel. Dr. Carlos Vargas is a world-renowned expert in sustainable finance and impact investing. He is a professor of finance at IGED Business School and Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico, and lecturer of sustainable finance at Harvard Extension School. Carlos has experience in sustainable finance, renewable energy, financial analysis, and real estate finance. He was formerly CFO for New Evolution Ventures Mexico, a subsidiary of an investment fund that manages fitness facilities worldwide. He also managed the real estate investment portfolio at BBVA Asset Management in Mexico. Carlos holds an ALM in sustainability from Harvard Extension School, an MBA from IPAD Business School in Mexico, and a PhD in sustainable finance from the University of Zurich. He has been published widely internationally and been invited to lecture at universities across the United States, Europe, and Latin America. Now, please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Carlos Vargas.
Thank you so much, Jill. Thanks so much for your kind words. And thanks everyone that was able to join us this morning. Well, very happy for this very kind invitation to present my book this morning. Sustainable Finance Fundamentals. As you may know, some of you have taken my class and you have seen how this topic has been evolving over the years. For me, it's a topic that it's very dear and close to my areas of knowledge. Yes, what I've been working on for these last 10, probably 12 years, or even more. I'm not sure anymore on this field. But also, it's very close to my personal interest. It's very, very close to my heart into trying to make sure this topic that we are interested in, and you also may be, because you're joining us this morning, you may also be dear to this topic. It's been evolving and it's become this presentation, and I had to. I would start here. What is sustainable finance? And when we talk about sustainable finance, well, we need to understand why do we care about it? How is it meant for, or how it should be implemented? Well, I hear a lot that people think about sustainable idea that we need to do something good, something better, and that's great. That's actually the essence of it, and that's actually how it needs to start sometimes. But it actually goes into doing so much more. Sustainable finance is a new way in which the finance world is starting to understand how everything that we do, of course, goes into our pocket. It is something that we do feel in our day-to-day activities. But it also has an impact, and it also has some implications into the environment, into social aspects, and way beyond, as we may understand. In the case of the environment, this is something that we hear more about every single day. When we think about environmental impact and all of these changes that come from pollution and all climate change that we experience every single day, there is a lot of us that can still deny climate change is happening. I don't think it's that the case anymore. In the case of climate change, we do see how 100-year storms and a lot of environmental phenomena continue to happen more frequently and strongly in many areas in the world. And we have to learn how to cope with it. The world is also taking some toll into actions that we have been making, and there's a better way to do it. That's how we can get into sustainable finance. Perhaps trying to understand how we can grow profits in considering all those elements. Well, some companies seem to think that is also possible. There is very innovative ways in which we can do business. There's very innovative ways in which financing can be, for example, selective of the kind of projects that they support, so that they put some weight into trying to make new projects, new developments more sustainable. And we see more of that today as well, because we are also more transparent in the way that we see the world, the way that we handle our decisions nowadays. This might be also perhaps because we are more connected today than we were some years ago. The way we interact with each other electronically through social media, through different outlets that let us show very much our thoughts, but also our preferences, and also our support to different things, different ideas, different projects, immediately has changed also the way that we perceive the world. And this interconnection also has made transparency a very, very important priority for a lot of us. In the way that we handle this in sustainable finance, well, we see that this all connects. In a way, the world is allowing for more complete information to be shared about absolutely everything. And now the fact that we own our own actions regarding environmental efforts and ambitions, social efforts and ambitions, it is the way that the world has been changing. There is no way to go back. There's gonna be only a world with more information and more that we will have to be dealing with going forward. It may take some time. We also see somehow how transitions tend to be at some points slower, at some points faster. And what we experienced with the pandemic was precisely that. The couple of years after the pandemic have shown how growing interest in sustainable finance will continue, and it's been showing very, very strongly into specific products that we see in the market, for example, green bonds, ESG funds, ESG weighted stocks, etc. Different things in the market that are trying to somehow incorporate sustainability in the way that we assess investments and in the way that we assess decision making. Having said that, well, perhaps the world is showing today that we are more into a place that it's closer to this picture that we have in front of us. It is not that we are already quite there yet, and that we have all the implementation and all the understanding that we would like to see in the world, but we are already starting. We already are at the point that this has started in different areas in the world at different paces. When we talk about this in the US, sometimes we hear about some political arguments that go behind it. Well, in a way, policy needs to align to logic and to best interest and to other things that sometimes we tend to put on second place. But in reality, in making the case of sustainable finance, we do see that there's some value that is created. When we create value, Well, in the case of finance, we try to recognize this and somehow put it in a way that we can also monetize that part of value. But the other important aspect for finance, in my understanding, is risk management. In the case of finance, we have a very deep connection in between value and risk, and we try to make that connection into building the case for sustainable finance. And in some cases, we're just starting to get there. We already know that the regulators in the US, the SEC, for example, is starting to push their own agenda in regards to first, how all of this information needs to be handled and communicated, but also into how we need to start complying into some disclosures that will start to be mandatory, not very far from today. And in other places in the world, we're already discussing how to deal with secondary regulation. In the case of Europe, and we also get a lot of you coming from European countries, or working for European companies or corporations, NGOs, etc. In Europe, for example, was the how to do it. Now, on understanding how this keeps evolving, more regulation will come afterwards to tell us a little bit more on the how to do it, and eventually into a way that we will need to make it implemented, to make it work in a way. Other places in the world, the case of Asia, in some cases, regulation is already in place as well in some countries. Some other countries are starting to understand their own deal of how to implement sustainable finance. Australia and New Zealand already working themselves into developing taxonomies, for example, and some other basic regulation that will trigger a lot of these implementation for the the years that will come forward. In the case of Latin America, not very far from there as well. Couple countries already with taxonomies. Colombia, Mexico already implemented taxonomies to tell what this is and how this needs to continue for the future. Just setting the first buckets into how to put things in place and how to be organizing our information and the kind of things that are relevant for claiming to be sustainable, to design products, to design investments, to assess them, etc. But this is just the beginning. At different paces, in different places, we're already getting somewhere with this. And the question is not anymore whether or not this will be very relevant for the finance industry. It already is. It already is a reality, and we'll see it evolve and continue evolving for next years. How fast we can do it? Well, we also hear how when we talk about COPs, for example, the conferences of the parties that take place every year, and this year's is just starting. We hear about how we can have ambitions for 2030, or rather we can do it for 2050. Well, the pressure is there, and we seem to be going a little bit faster right now. I was mentioning at the beginning of this talk how the pandemic helped expedite some of these understanding and some of these awareness, and it really happened. We will see, for example, when we check the numbers of how much investments into sustainable oriented investments, for example, impact investments or ESG or green bonds or other kinds of financial products that are already earmarked or labeled to promote sustainability, they keep on growing. And we will be more aware and more willing to invest into a lot of this as years pass, because that regulation that it's also taking place everywhere in the world is also aligning so that organizations and corporations are starting to find a better fit for a lot of this. In trying to find definitions, we do have different ways we can define sustainable finance. I share a couple of them in the book. I think in many cases, we try to agree that we need to incorporate other factors rather than the financial aspects into finance so that we make it sustainable finance. Environmental, social, governance criteria are typically what we hear that needs to be put in place in order to make it work. Another interesting way to frame sustainable finance is also looking at long-term. In many cases, when we think about finance, we think about short-term return, and we make investments in cases that are really short-term, and we try to make returns so that we can justify the kind of risk that we make in investments. Well, in a way, there's also an incentive for a lot of investors to go into long-term to preserve value, to create more value. And that kind of thinking, that kind of perspective also has been a very much eye-opening for a lot of people that are involved into these topics. Thinking about responsibility, thinking about governance, thinking about sustainability, all of these are topics that interconnect and are part of all of these ambitions. Having said that, in the concept that we try to understand about sustainable finance, we do understand an active, profitable process. When we talk about sustainable finance, we do not consider that we do things only because they're good. We also try to create value because in a way, sustainable finance needs to understand that value creation part as well. That has been an important element to keep in mind for this because we are not inventing philanthropy, for example. Philanthropic efforts are great, are much needed in the world, but are complementary to other actions that we need to be pro-social and to continue working as a human society. But in the case of sustainable finance, we do understand the role that we have in creating value from the perspective of finance. We just do it more holistically, more complete, so that we can also make it more eco-friendly, more social-friendly, more correct, more responsible, etc. Why do we do it? I try to make it so that we understand it in our own terms. Perhaps why now? Well, we now have electric cars. We now have cars that will not be powered by petroleum, and that's a great thing that's been happening in the last 10 years that we have developed technology for electromobility. Perhaps we also have a lot of things that we can go back to the basics and in a way try to grow our food more organically and trying to be more responsible in that regard. Perhaps we just do it for the environment, and there is a lot of these very much awareness about the environment in recent years that we want to incorporate into our strategies. And if we are a company, for example, well, trying to understand as well that our clients, our employees, and every other stakeholder that it's around is going to be questioning everything that we do, because in a way, we have that connection. If we are a company that is offering a product or service, of course, the kind of a connection that we have with society is that we depend on society. And then trying to understand how the people that get our products, the people that work for us, also are going to be connecting to this. That's going to be super, super relevant. Perhaps because we have waste and doing some recycling, that can be another reason why it's becoming a relevant topic today. But for me, it's because we all depend on it. We are part of the same society. We are part of the same environment. And in a way, all of these will be connecting because it's in the best interest of ourselves individually, but also in the best interest of our families, our communities. And in a way, there's a lot of rationale and a lot of understanding on how we could be doing a little bit more on trying to promote sustainable finance. Why now? Well, as I was mentioning, there's a lot of global support to these topics. Some areas in the world going a little bit faster in this case, but in a way that also generates competition. And in a way, we also need to compete to other places that are already doing it and doing it as an added value to their markets. And in a way, that's going to be pushing for change. One typical example I use when I talk about this, for example, in class, is talking about the case of the US. In the US, we haven't come to an agreement to already have regulation regarding, let's talk about green bonds. And in the case of green bonds, we still are the single one country in the world that subscribes the most green bonds per year. We do subscribe a significant amount of the green bonds in the world. And as a single country, we are really relevant on that topic. And yet, we haven't regulated that yet. If we were to talk about other different things and efforts that are done on sustainability, the reality is that even though the US is not quite there yet in regulation in many areas, we are already the leaders of the markets on that. How can we approach this? Well, by having certifications, by having frameworks, by having different kinds of guidelines that we can also import from other places where it's already happening and where people need to organize themselves even faster than the regulator will come to recognize. That regulatory landscape, as I had mentioned, is different in different places in the world. But in reality, the main driver here is going to be investor demand. We all like these kind of causes. Typically, we can hear about how people may be interested into these different objectives that I was mentioning before. And in a way, there's always some benefit in doing things better. Just the main driver of trying to do things better, it's also interesting and appealing for many. So in that way, the investor demand is going to be a great driver for this, and the market for sustainable products in finance already showing that. Risk mitigation as well. Well, as I was mentioning, all of these environmental phenomena that we are experiencing in recent years are no casualty. It's something that is really starting to happen in the world very significantly in recent years, basically because we are just living to see the effects of the actions we've taken in the past. If this was easy to just solve or reverse, we would have already done it. That is clear. The thing is, we still need to deal with it. We still need to cope with a lot of these effects, and we will start to develop solutions to do that. That's part of human nature, and that's gonna open a significant amount of opportunities in the world, and we'll get into that. How are we gonna approach that? Well, through innovation. That innovation is gonna have to show very interesting opportunities, and we start to see more and more of these in the world we live today. The kind of services that we experience with many number of things that are significantly more efficient today than they were years before are clear proof of that. We see a lot of technological change, and that will also help support that part of innovation that will make us more efficient, that will make us more effective. And that way, perhaps we can also deal with the impacts that we have on areas of environmental and social aspects. Shareholder and stakeholder expectations, well, that's also part of the typical discussion that we have in this kind of area. Why? Because in the case of stakeholders, it's understandings that companies not only have to provide support of the profits that they get to their stockholders, they also need to show society that they have some value that they offer. And that creates a sort of license to operate, that it's also great to understand that basically in this world that we live in, we need to create value that can also be shared with all. Not only the part that we need to report to the people that own the stock of the company, of course that is important. People that invest in companies do it because they trust that strategy, they trust that management, they trust what that company is doing, and that is great because that also creates a connection. But in reality, that company also has a connection with other parties, and we also talk about that part. And how also as well, long-term value creation is important to be considered in the scope of everything that we do today. Why? Because we not only want to create some value that we can see in the short term, we also want to see that our companies, our organizations, our governments, every institution that we work with in this world is also resilient in the long run. That's also part of the objective of every organization that we would think of, and this will also be shown on that urgency. The book, I promised Jill that I would talk about a little bit of how I came with the idea of writing a book. This is my first published book, not really the first one I've been writing. I do have a couple others that are on the pipeline. I'll show you a little bit in a moment. But this is the one I was able to publish. In my personal case, because the pandemic gave me enough time to get organized and sorting out some of the ideas I had behind writing this very book. Sustainable finance fundamentals came from my experience teaching at Harvard for a decade. I started teaching this subject years before it was fancy. When we first started teaching this at the extension school, I got the opportunity by the faculty, one of those faculty meetings they have right before I was finishing my master's in sustainability at the extension school. That's why I'm also an alum of the extension school. Before I was finishing the master's, I was already telling my teachers that we were somehow missing this part. We needed to understand also how sustainability connects to business, specifically how financially connected sustainability is to business as well. And I started working on designing a curriculum for a class that at the time had not really that much to back it up regarding materials to use for the class. Even at the time, I had to buy every single book I could find on Amazon regarding sustainable finance. It wasn't that many at the time. It was probably 10, 12 books I had to read because really there wasn't a lot being said on sustainable finance just yet. I'm talking about probably 2011, 2012. What has changed since is that the topic has evolved significantly, and not only has it evolved, it has been taking shape in a way that it's more easy to understand today. I started teaching the class just after I graduated. The only requirement the faculty asked at the time, and I think is fair, that I could not be a student and a teacher of the same program. It wouldn't really make sense. So they let me run a test for the class the year after I graduated, which was fair. And I've been teaching that class since. It's been a great experience. I've been teaching the class only at Harvard for over 1,300 students already. We already have a lot of people that have taken the class. I have also been able, I'm very lucky to be able to teach this same class in Switzerland at University of Zurich, where I did my PhD on sustainable finance. I've also been teaching this class at Universidad de los Andes in Colombia, which they have been invited me the last couple of years to do a summer school with them. I also have been teaching this class in Mexico, in Tecnológico de Monterrey, which is one of the biggest universities in Latin America, the biggest private university in Latin America, actually. And then after all of these years of work, I've also seen a growing interest in this topic. I, for example, am part of a group of faculty led by Kellogg School of Management that it's joining together over 400 faculty members that are already working in sustainable finance all over the world today. I'm also part of another organization that puts together the best universities in the world, also on organizing conferences to share knowledge about sustainable finance. The field that I'm working in, sustainable finance, has grown significantly in these 10, 12 years. So what I have seen here in this book was my intention to share a little bit of that learning process that I've had since my time at the Extension School and how it had been evolving as faculty for the Extension and summer schools at Harvard for these 10 years. And this will be as well the book that we will be using in the intro class, E138, that I will tell you about as well at the Extension School in a moment. Some feel that I can give you about how the book look and feels. It's here, for example, in some of these diagrams. The way I try to make the book is very easy to read and very easy to understand, because in a way I designed it for my students, for the students that take my class, but I also designed it for a broader audience. In my particular case, I am an academic, but I am also a practitioner. I do have a day job that I work as a chief sustainability officer for a company. I do hold a couple of positions as board member, trying to promote these topics as well at the board level. So in my view, the way sustainable finance is, it is something very practical. It is something very easy to use once you understand what it is. So I do have a lot of these sort of diagrams. Some of them, for example, here, help contextualize some of the basic ideas and knowledge behind how it came to be. A lot of these figures, for example, are from the first chapter that talks about what is sustainable finance, just to give you an idea how the book looks like. How all of these concepts also seem to be evolving and going from one conception that they need to be integrated, in this particular case of the planet, people, profit understanding, into a more holistic and evolved idea that they're basically concentric circles themselves, and how these, for example, comes to go and build other very interesting theories like Kate Raworth's donut economics theory that understands not only the necessity to connect all of these elements, but actually to make them fit into the right place. And we also talk about this as part of some of it. We also try to put in context in the book how traditional finance does have in view as well risk and profit as the center of their objective. How philanthropy, for example, has a view of trying to go for the impact, trying to have a positive impact in different areas. But in a way, there's a possibility to find a few of alternatives in between. And that it's also shown, for example, with this very, very stylized representation, because obviously there's many other things that can also be put here. But it's a way to show how it can be done more holistically, to incorporate that. For topics like ESG that we hear about every single day, we, for example, talk about the different strategies that we have within ESG. ESG is something so popular and so broad today that there's different ways to approach it. ESG is a lot of information, data that's available for analysis, and the way we use it also opens up the possibility of having different strategies and different things that we can do with it. So in a way, I would say these kind of areas of the book as well, and I'll talk about the chapters in a moment. They go deeper into understanding some of these applications and trying to understand how they work, why they were meant to be to begin with, etc., and to give you a very good context of what it is, what sustainable finance is. As the title of the book says, it is Sustainable Finance Fundamentals. Will give you all the basics that you will need for understanding what is sustainable finance. But there's some of these topics that actually evolved a little bit more, and I'll talk about that as well at the end, because I think we have a couple questions on that regard on the chat. We talk about metrics, how information is relevant for sustainable finance. Of course, we need to do more disclosure, we need to do more reporting, we need to do more organized disclosure and reporting, and we see how this also works, like how it looks like, and how it becomes useful, and basically how we can use that kind of information. We also talk about the complexities, and one example that I give sometimes is all the acronyms that we have within sustainable finance, and how it also becomes sometimes an alphabet soup, and how it is complicated to navigate in sustainable finance, and how we get into understanding a lot of these concepts. I do my best to give you all the basics, and I try my best to keep it up to date as well. But having said that, it is a topic that changes constantly, and we also have the intention in the future to also give additional resources to the book that will be probably published next year, hopefully, to also keep up to date with things that also continue to change as these topics continues to evolve. We try to give us a complete of an approach as possible with the international focus that can come from understanding that different markets have different understandings and different levels of application of sustainable finance, but this to make it relevant to all users and all people that are interested in this topic. An example of the topics that we cover in the book, we start with an intro that it's really a little bit more of what I was able to share this morning, but also includes part of what I already mentioned here. We then go into how value is created through sustainable finance. Value creation is an important element of it, and it's, of course, considered. Financial institutions, their role, how they have been changing, evolving into trying to implement sustainable finance into what they do and what they have been offering, how they can align as well to certain certifications, certain principles, etc. Different approaches to sustainable finance, particularly from the side of investments, how to implement sustainable finance, how it looks like. Basics of reporting, talking about these different frameworks that we hear about, ISSP, GRI, TCFD. What does this mean? And this is part of the alphabet soup that I was mentioning as well. We describe it on the book. Equity ownership, and that particular part, very important to highlight. When we invest on equity, we own it. We also share responsibilities as owners of that equity, and we also talk about that part. Bonds in different colors, shapes, and sizes. Green bonds, very, very popular topic, but that's not it. There's different colors of bonds. We have blue bonds, white bonds. We have different kinds of new implementations into thematic bonds, for example, transition bonds, sustainability-linked bonds, which are different to sustainability bonds. And all of these we also explain, all of these categories, how do they differ from each other? How do bonds, traditional bonds, differ from some of these thematic bonds? Next chapter, we talk about passive investments. A lot of people invest in funds. We basically invest into package deals that our asset managers are offering us. And there's a lot of money into that particular category. Well, how that works, what kind of assessments can be done about them? How do we understand them? Alternative assets, there's many more things that we can invest in beyond equity and bonds. We can invest in real estate, infrastructure, commodities, a lot of categories that also fall outside of traditional investments. We also talk about this. Insurance and risk, as we were talking about value, we cannot forget risk. Value and risk are the two essential elements of financial assessment and financial value assessment. So it's important to keep it in mind. Carbon markets, a very interesting alternative to try to measure, approach, and offset carbon emissions. We also talk about that part, their dynamics, and very, very interesting alternatives that also exist to them. Transition to clean energy, and this here, the important element is transition. We want to go greener on energy. That's an ambition that we have everywhere in the world, but we cannot do it just by saying it. It does take important investments. It does take time. It does take a lot of effort, and we need to understand that particular part, how to transition to a greener energy world. Innovation, a path to follow, something very interesting in finance as well. A lot of things is happening. As I was writing the book earlier this year, I'm talking about probably winter, spring this year, I was also hearing a lot about artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence became something just a couple months ago, and we had to also incorporate it into the book as part of innovation, because a lot of things were said about innovation in finance, but we could not miss that important piece about artificial intelligence that was basically changing the world we live in from this year on. A couple appendices also included in the book, one for time value of money, another one for financial statements. A lot of my students in sustainable finance not always come from financial backgrounds. We have a lot of people from finance that want to learn about sustainability, but we also have a lot of people from sustainability that want to learn about finance. So I included these two appendices for those that need them. It's not going to be something very dense and very complex. It's just going to give you the basics to get a general understanding about finance and those elements, how they will connect to a lot of what you will learn in the book. This is something that makes also this book very different to what we have as well on the market, because a lot of people don't consider including that financial part into part of the content of the book. We included that in the appendix because it was requested by some of our students in class, for example. Target audience, I would say everyone. I would say sometimes we hear how for sustainability books, we have these kind of hardcore environmentalists, and perhaps we typically see this picture of Greta Thunberg, for example, being angry about everything that's happening in the world. Well, in reality, it is all of us, and we also can see it in a more optimistic way. That's also my focus and my approach on writing the book, because in reality, we all could be part of the solution. We all could be learning more about these topics, And I do think this second picture of Greta shows better her own essence. Of course, we should be occupied into trying to solve a lot of these issues, but we can also do it better, and we can also offer a little bit more. Some people were asking in the chat about additional resources. When I teach the class, I also talk about a lot of books as well that I like on sustainable finance. And if you send me an email, there's my email in the end. I can give you a list if that helps. I think it was, I cannot find the question now, but anybody that had that question, I'm happy to send you additional resources. The ones that I wanted to portray this morning, of course, were my own. So this is the book that I just published, Sustainable Finance Fundamentals. I also contributed with this other one that was Essential Concepts of Sustainable Finance, also published this year. I contribute some concepts and the review of the book with Professor Sankak and a lot of other faculty and contributors that were part of this huge effort to create a dictionary about sustainable finance. I will be publishing this other one next year. It's called Asset Pricing. Now that we have already understood the essentials of sustainable finance, we will need to go into more applied things on finance for sustainable finance. So this is the second stage. I do see a lot of experts going now into publishing more specific books about certain topics of finance that can deploy sustainability as part of their approach. And this asset pricing book, it's a great example of this. This is already published in German by my colleagues that co-wrote the book. This one already in German is on its second edition. The one we will publish next year will be available in English. We will be publishing the English version. The thing is, a lot of the examples that you find in this book also come from the German-speaking world. So in a way, we also want to see work on an analysis on banks, for example, in the US, banks in the UK, banks in Europe in general, not only German banks, not only Swiss banks. So that's why we wanted to take some time to not only translate the book, but also design the content so that it can be better applied for you guys as readers. Another element that I also wanted to share as a resource is the class that I teach using Sustainable Finance Fundamentals. This is the screenshot of the website of the class. If you're interested, you also have the QR code that links you to the Extension School at Harvard, so you can take a look at it, and if you like it, perhaps even enroll. I'm pretty sure there's going to be shared on the chat as well. Veronica is going to help us with that link. How to get the book? The book is available everywhere. There's a new QR code. This one on green is showing the link to get the book from the editor, Routledge, that was very kind to publish the book on October this year. You can also get it at the COOP at Harvard. You can also get it on Amazon. It's basically available everywhere if you're interested. The one that I was showing is the paperback. There's also hardback, but I really, really, really recommend the ebook. But it's up to you guys how you like reading. There's my contact information. I also have another email from Harvard as well that you can find on the website for the Extension School. And thank you so much for your time. And thank you, Jill.
Oh, that was fantastic. I can't thank you enough, honestly. And we have many kind of technical questions about the book in the chat, and relative to the setup that you mentioned, I personally just want to share how much I appreciated personally, like the segments of each chapter where you go into discussion questions, you suggest them, You have notes that are pretty extensive, as well as works that you cite. So while I found this book very approachable, and gratefully so, because I have no formal training in sustainability, I really appreciated that, how you were able to marry, simplifying and making approachable ways that everyone can participate in meeting this challenge, but also like providing the next level of detail for those of you that do have an extensive background, or you're looking for a deeper dive. Like, this book is absolutely full of that information as well. So the fact that you were able to do that in one publication, to me, is just downright heroic. So really kudos on that. I also just wanted to mention that, after this event concludes, we do share that recording with you. All of you who registered will get that recording in a link in an email, as well as it will be live on our YouTube channel. But Carlos, any links that you wish to share, we can put in that email as well to get resources out, or further links to you, to your future books, to websites that you find relevant. I know that there is such engagement in this chat, people looking for, very particular tactical approaches. Say for smaller businesses. There's a great example of farming, and what does a farmer do with limited resources, or a smaller family business. Generally, any of those resources that you can share that might be helpful for a blended audience, we'd love to put forward. But if you want to start there, is there a way for the more limited in resource businesses and companies to start? Where do they begin?
Yeah, well, it depends. Of course, there's different ways it can be approached. And it's such a broad topic that sometimes it is also no one-size-fits-all solution, I would say. In the case of, in the book and also in class, what I try to do is I also give examples of case studies or cases of application where these can be done in different areas, in different places. One that I can mention, for example, in limited resources, I do have a case, for example, that I'm pretty sure I included it in the book, about green building in Mexico. In the case of green building, that's a very, very big topic everywhere in the world. Is taking place at different paces. The way it was implemented in Mexico, it was to make houses that were worth less than $20,000. It was quite a challenge, because we're talking about a size of a market and basically the ability of a certain bucket of the market to be able to afford a home, that it's really not as easy to deal with when you have such limited resources. So in that way, that particular application required paying for sustainability solutions that were worth in total less than $2,000. So you had to maximize the impact that you could do with such limited resources for an effort that would, in the end, represent implementation of over 400,000 homes over 8-9 year period, more or less. So, I mean, that's a very specific case for green building, but there's others that we also discuss in the book regarding other efforts and other activities, in some cases trying to look for the low-hanging fruits so that you can eventually escalate the approach and do more ambitious things once you have proven that you can do it, or perhaps once you can free some resources so that you can approach the use of those resources into doing more and scaling up the approach. So it depends. There's so much to do that there's so many ways to approach it.
Yeah, absolutely. Hence the value and the shared love of the case study. I think, that kind of unifies our population who has studied here at Harvard. Many illuminating case studies. So thank you for that. Let's see. We have so many questions in the chat. It's kind of hard to know where to begin. Generally, you're very optimistic, and I really appreciate the optimism and that value proposition in, the long-term value and accentuating innovation and opportunity. And, you're mentioning risk and risk aversion, but it's about resiliency. I think that that's, a really wonderful kind of avenue in which to approach this. Do you have any favorites? Do you have any renewable energy, options that are good in your case? Do you look at them with optimism? Do you see, bonds of any type having a really significant impact? Do you have your favorite means of these resources?
Well, that's actually a great question, because that is something that I get a lot in class. For example, when we talk about renewable energy, I do think that the most popular, obviously, it's solar energy. We all seem to be very much in favor of solar panels. They look, they make a statement. They look good to show that you're doing something, right? But in a way, solar panels, for example, are not really the most logical solution when you do the financials and you start analyzing the return of investing in solar. Having said that, there's many technologies on renewable energy that are out there. There's a lot of innovation. Massachusetts in particular, it's actually a leading force in that regard in the world. And it's, it keeps evolving. Well, having said that, still, solar panels are a good case now, and are something that makes sense now, because the kind of prices that we have, the kind of, I don't know, like solutions that we can find, that it's just more easy to understand how much you need to install, how it's going to be done by a company that takes care of everything. It's been evolving. But there's also so much more we could be doing to complement that. That would be the kind of effort that would be just the first thing to approach. And there's so much more that could be done. Having said that, there's other things that seem less intuitive. For example, doing some other efforts in saving water. Water, for example, has significantly more impact than a lot of things that we do on a day-to-day basis. And yet, some of their implementations are financially viable. They do, of course, reduce cost and end up in savings, which is great for people, for companies, depends. But then we sometimes don't keep it in mind. So it depends. The case of green bonds that you were also mentioning, green bonds are super interesting to a lot of people. We like them. We tend to think that's going to be an interesting alternative. And yet, there's so much more that will be happening with green bonds in the future. Right now, I was hearing the number the other day from one of the experts on the field, saying that already we are reaching very important numbers in regards of green bonds, going to approximately 20% of the market in some geographies. That's huge. That's getting just there. And that already is worth over $3 trillion on total. That's a lot of money. So there's a lot of things that are going to be going there, and a lot of things we'll be hearing about that going forward. But it's still just beginning. It's just getting there. So that's going to be interesting. I think it's well, to me, it's a very, very interesting topic, and I get excited, and thanks.
Well, yeah, your energy is very infectious, and you can feel that energy in the questions and in the chat. There is so much interest, in learning more. And I really appreciate, your perspective in teaching this course for 10 years. Like, I can just imagine how much, your content has innovated and changed through that time, given all that the world has endured and all that is yet to come. I think that, you're never done iterating. So this is just terrific. And, we're coming to the end of our hour. I just want to, thank you once again for sharing all of your great work and your expertise and your love and downright wonderful ambassadorship of Harvard Extension School. I think, on the school's behalf, we're very grateful for you. And it says a lot that you were capable of putting together course content as a student, but they needed to wait until you finished, with your degree. It's just amazing. All that you really have inspired here at the school, and our sustainability community is incredible, and the work that is happening is just such amazing to share. So we want to keep that going. And for all of you on the Zoom today, you will receive links going forward and a recording, but I do encourage you to pick up this fabulous book. We'll drop that link again in chat, but also consider taking even deeper dive with this class. There are limited seats available for section, let's see, it's E138 here at Harvard Extension School. So I really encourage you to check that out. And please do keep in touch. Carlos, I know that we will hear from you again, and in the process of writing a subsequent book, please do share it with us so we may share it with our community. It's incredible. So cheers to you, and take good care.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much, Jill. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. See you soon. Bye.